Okay, it's time to do a way too early set review of Theros Beyond Death. We're going to just do totally limited here. We're going to break it down by color. We're just going to go through the card image gallery. Totally limited. I may do constructed in some other review, but we're doing limited for now, and this is white. So Alseid of Lice Bounty. 1 mana 1/1 lifelink is not typically very good. This is an enchantment creature. I haven't even looked through the whole spoiler let. I guess I should say. So I've seen the previews as they've been happening, so I have some idea of the themes of the set, but not in tons of depth. Anyway, yeah, 1 mana 1/1 lifelink, probably not very good. This ability is pretty good, but I don't think that it's honestly that good. I think this card is going to be a playable. 1 mana 1/1 lifelink is fine, but unless unless the enchantment creatureness of it is more important than what I've seen, I don't think it's going to be great. I think spending this much and having to leave up a mana to protect a thing, you better have a really good thing you want to protect, or otherwise it's just kind of meh. They can always kill this and should be able to kill it pretty easily, I think. So I think this is going to be like a C minus, but it could be widely variable. It could be almost unplayable, and it could be very good. I'm not really sure how bomby the set is. It hasn't seemed that bomby, but I could well be wrong on that. And I'm also not sure, though, how much the enchantmentness matters, or how good the removal is. Like I don't really know what the removal is like so much at this point. But anyway, let's move on to the next card. Archon of Falling Stars, 6 mana 4/4 flyer, tends to be okay. When it dies, you may return target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's a very good ability. I expect most decks, even if they aren't enchantment heavy, by the time that a 6-drop would die, you're probably usually going to have, you're going to have some stuff that's died, and probably you can usually have an enchantment. So this is often going to be getting a card back. So it's a 2-for-1 on an already reasonable body, and it saves you mana on the returning. So you probably aren't going to get a great card back, but even so, this card should be very good. This looks like a B. Maybe a B plus if the enchantments are more prevalent than and better than I think, but it's very good. Archon of Sun's Grace, ready for your Archon tribal decks. 4 mana 3/4 flying lifelink is already excellent. And then Pegasus creatures you control have lifelink. I'm not sure if there are any other Pegasuses. There might be Pegasi? There might be a couple other, but whenever enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you got to make another 2/2 flyer, which is an excellent ability as well. And as long as this guy is on the battlefield, Archon's probably gender neutral, right? As long as this creature is on the battlefield. 2/2 white Pegasus with flying. So this card looks like a complete bomb and probably one of the best white cards in the set, if not one of the best cards in the set. Vanishing Light we've seen before, really good removal. Maybe a little bit worse than normal here. Better than normal in some ways because it can remove enchantments, which is something you want to do, but probably worse than normal in a lot of ways because everybody's going to have, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people are going to have enchantment removal, which does hurt this quite a bit. Still probably a B, but not more than that. I think it would often be a B plus. This might even be closer to a B minus in this set. Birth of Meletis. So this card, you get a Plains, then you get a Wall, an 0/4, and then you gain 2 life. This card seems perfectly reasonable. It's an enchantment. It will go to the graveyard for escape. Triggers Constellation. It is kind of a 2-for-1. The gain 2 life isn't worth a card, but is nice. The 0/4 is probably not quite worth a card, and searching your library for a Plains is not quite worth a full card either, but that's pretty close. So this may be like a 1.5-for-1 overall. On a 2-mana card, it helps you survive. It's pretty good. This is going to be, I think, probably a C+. Captivating Unicorn. 5 mana 4/4. When an enchantment enters the battlefield, you can tap a creature your opponent controls. I don't know that you're going to have that many enchantments that you can do this like multiple times a turn reliably. You can probably do it once a turn for a few turns. And if you time that right, that's pretty nice. But it's a 5 mana 4/4, which are just typically eminently replaceable. I think this is going to be like a D plus, maybe a C minus, but probably a D plus. Commanding Presence is an aura. It enchants a creature +2/+2 and first strike whenever it deals combat damage to a player. You make a 1/1. There are some things that reward you for going wide, so that's kind of nice, although this itself makes you go tall. It makes them want to block this creature that you put it on, which is usually pretty unblockable. You do have the 2-for-1 potential, so you should be a bit wary of that. I think this gets you close to the battlecruiser kind of magic that you would normally have from the first Theros block. I still don't think it's great though. It's really hard for me to evaluate without knowing what the removal and bounce is like though. Because it's going to make a creature pretty large probably, and the first strike is going to make it really hard to block profitably. I think this is probably going to be pretty good. They're going to have to chump it a lot, probably. Well, you're going to get 1/1s basically, so it's going to be hard to race. They're really going to need removal, but it's pretty bad if they have removal. I guess if it's not instant speed, you're going to get at least some value out of it. I guess I'm going to guess C plus for this, but I'm very unconfident in commanding presence. My grade on that. Okay, Dawn Evangel. Whenever a creature dies, an aura you controlled was attached to it. Return target creature card with CMC 2 or less from graveyard to hand. I don't think you're going to want a ton of auras. And you really don't want your aura creatures to die. It's like a slight mitigation of that drawback. So I guess if there's a lot of auras that you do want to, that are really good that you want to put on, I don't think this card is very good though, because it makes you jump through hoops that you don't want to jump through, and the base rate of a 3-mana 2/3 is not that great. I think this is going to be like a D plus, maybe a C minus. Daxos Blessed by the Sun. It's a 2-star, where star is your devotion to white, which should be at least a 2/2 because this is on the battlefield. Whenever another creature enters under your control or dies, you gain a life, which is pretty nice. But mostly this is going to be like a 2/3 that grows into a 2/4. So it's going to be a pretty good blocker. It's mostly a good defensive creature. It can attack fine, but with only 2 power. As soon as they get a bigger thing, and then attacking doesn't hurt so much, isn't so hard to do. So, I mean, obviously on turn 2, it's perfectly fine as a 2/2 that will get to be a 2/3 or a 2/4. But it doesn't seem that great to me. C. Still a little hard to cast. C plus maybe. It does get you the enchantment creature that might be nice for some stuff. The enchantment fall stuff, sort of constellation. It does have 2 white pips, which might be an upside if white devotion is a thing, but I think it's a C, maybe a C plus. It's hard to see it being much better than that though. Daybreak Chimera. It's a 5-mana 3/3 flyer that costs X less, where X is your devotion to white. So realistically, you're not going to be able to play this before turn 4 very often, because you're unlikely to have a 1-drop, and your 2-drop is unlikely to have 2 white pips. So then you can maybe play a 3-drop and make it cheaper than 4 mana, but then it's turn 4, and maybe if you miss your 4th land drop, you can still play this on turn with 3 mana on turn 4. Mostly you're going to be playing it on turn 4 for like maybe 2, 3 mana. If you can get it down for 2, then you might be able to go like 2-drop, 3-drop, both of which have 1 pip, and then you can go 2-drop this. With the 2-drop also has 1 pip. That requires a lot of white. If you could do that, the more cost reduction does a little bit help, and maybe you can play it a little bit better, as a 2 spell later in the game a little more easily, because it'll only cost 3, maybe 2. It's going to be a little bit hard to have all your white creatures though. Like, you're probably not playing mono white, I wouldn't think, in this set. But anyway, just being able to have it fairly reliably be a 4-mana 3/3 flyer. 4-mana 3/3 flyer tends to be excellent. So, I mean, you do have to have a white creature on 2 mana or 3 or 1, I guess. All white permanent. So it's not like totally free that it'll be a 4-mana 3/3 flyer, but I think it normally will be. Sometimes it has a little more upside, sometimes a little more downside. Anyway, should be a solid C plus, maybe even a B minus. Dreadful Apathy, super solid removal. It's a pacifism that can eventually exile the creature. That's got to be like it is 3 mana, and there is the enchantment removal that you saw from Banishing Light be an issue there, but because you can activate this to exile that thing, You can make it be, if they don't have the enchantment removal fast, be more permanent. So I think it's actually pretty comparable to Banishing Light, and I gave Banishing Light a B. I guess I'm going to also give this a B. I think they're very close to each other, and wouldn't be stunned if Dreadful Apathy is actually better, but I think it's probably a little bit worse. So this is B minus or B. Eidolon of Obstruction, mostly it's a 2 mana 2/1 first strike enchantment creature, which is fine, but not great. It's like a C+. Loyalty abilities of your planeswalkers, your opponent's control cost 1 more to activate, is nice if they have a planeswalker, but if they have a planeswalker, having this ain't gonna save you probably, so yeah. Um, Elspeth Conquers Death. Um, yeah, the first mode of this is very good and limited because you got to exile any permanent an opponent controls that has CMC 3 or greater. It's going to be very hard to turn a land into a permanent that has CMC 3 or greater, but any permanent. And big things are usually what you want to kill. 3 or greater is very easy to. Like if your opponent doesn't have any permanents that are 3 or greater, you're probably in great shape anyway, so you don't really need this that much. Chapter 2 of this is probably not that important for limited, but I mean, it's better than nothing, I guess. Um, yeah, and then the third mode, you gotta zombify something with an extra +1/+1 counter, or if you're monstrously lucky, a planeswalker. Yeah, so this is like mostly this is a 2-for-1 where both of the two are pretty good. Mode 1 is probably even a card you might play by itself, and then Chapter 3 is also a card you might play by itself. Uh, the order is pretty good. His card's got to be very good. It's probably a B. Um, Elspeth, Sun's Nemesis. Yeah, you got to make 2/1/1s. You got to pump your stuff. You got to gain 5 life, which I don't really expect you to do much, but hey, it might come up some, especially because you might want to say you've played Elspeth, you minus it, so it has 3 loyalty. You have a bunch of cards in your graveyard. You can escape it this turn. You might gain 5 life just to be able to replay Elspeth this turn as opposed to next. I kind of think you probably still don't do that very often, but this isn't great if you're behind because these 1/1s are not the best. It's probably not as good as most planeswalkers usually because it mostly wants you to be ahead or at parity, but it can be a lot of card advantage. It's still very good. I think this is probably about an A minus, whereas most planeswalkers are A's. This one's not quite as good, but it's still very good. Okay, Favored of Iroas. Whenever an enchantment enters the battle, so for instance, Elspeth I think is not as good as Archon of Sun's Grace. Anyway, it's still very good. You're going to take it every time. Favored of Iroas, 3 mana 2/2, not so good. Constellation, whenever an enchantment you control enters the battlefield, it gets double strike. I don't think this card is very good because, yeah, 3 mana 2/2 double strike is good, but you have to work to make it double strike. And it's not like a 3 mana 2/2 double strike is that good. It's pretty good, but it's not like, oh my gosh, I'm going to win the game now. Like a 2/3 still trades with it, right? So, given that you have to jump through hoops to make it good, and it's not even great if you do, I think this card's not very good. I'm going to give it a C minus still because if you have enough enchantment creatures, and we've seen quite a few already. I mean, this is a rare, and these are mostly uncommons. Uncommon. So you're probably not going to have a ton, but you're going to have some, it looks like. You know what? I'm going to give this a D+. Yeah, I don't think it's that good. Flicker of Fate. Is a little bit of annoying naming convention because normally we talk about flickers being returning at the end of or at the beginning of the next end step, and this is what we normally call a blink, which returns immediately. 2 mana to blink something. It does work well with Constellation, I suppose. If your opponent has enchantment-based removal, if your opponent has gotten an aura on something, or to play around their removal spell on your thing. All of those add up to this being roughly playable, but I still don't think it's very good. It's got to be D plus C minus. You don't want multiples of it. Glory Bearers, 4 mana 3/4 is fine. Enchantment creature is. I'm still not sure if that's an upside. I guess it's an upside. The constellation's enough to make it an upside, and enchantment removal isn't that ubiquitous, probably. Either you just want to fire it off on anything. So I guess it's probably a slight upside, but anyway, it mostly is something you think about when you're deck building, because if you have Constellation, or when you're drafting, if you have Constellation, then you want the enchantment creatures more. If you have enchantment creatures, then Constellation gets a little better. Anyway, 4 mana 3/4 that whenever you attack another creature you control attacks, it attacks as a 3/5. Perfectly solid, but not super exciting. So it's mostly going to attack as a 3/5 and block as a 3/4. For 4 mana, that's pretty good, but not great. It's probably a C. Heliod, 3 mana 5/5 indestructible. It's not a creature unless your devotion is 5 or more. That can happen late in a lot of games, but it's not like super easy. Whenever you gain life, you got to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature or enchantment, which mostly just means this, because this is probably, almost certainly, the only non-creature enchantment that you're going to want to put +1/+1 counters on in your deck. So you could put it on this or a creature. And then you could pay 2 mana to give a creature lifelink until end of turn. That's actually probably pretty easy to underrate. The +1/+1 counters is a little bit hard to do. I mean, this is a little bit finicky. If you can get this turned on, it's absolutely fantastic. You probably can't get this turned on super easily. I think this is probably a B+. It wouldn't stun me if that's a massive overrate. If devotion is just not that hard to not that easy to get or maintain, then this card is only pretty good. B+ is probably about right, because the other abilities probably do give you enough. It's not that easy to gain life other than from this, but it does build in to give you life gain as well. So, if you just have like another big creature, you're probably okay. Heliod's Intervention, destroy X target artifacts and or enchantments. Target player gains twice X life. This card is probably good in limited, even because of the first mode. And it's all down to that first mode. The second mode, having it is nice, because sometimes you want a pure life gain spell. Sometimes you're racing and your opponent looks like they're going to kill you, and you just gain 2 life for 3 mana, or 4 life for 4 mana, or 6 life for 5 mana, and that's enough to swing the race. You do it after they attack. It's nice that it's an instant. You do it after they attack, and it's not a dead card if they don't have any artifacts or enchantments. That's one thing. But the first mode, I mean, 3 mana to kill probably something reasonable. This set has enough enchantments, and I guess that it gets artifacts is nice too. 4 mana to kill 2 things, if you can get that, is quite good. 4 mana for a 2-for-1 where both things matter, and both things are probably mattering. I think that's going to be the mode that this gets played in most often, and I think this is probably like a B-. If enchantments are super prevalent, it might be even better. You can get a 2-for-1, you can get a 3-for-1 out of it maybe. Then it's really good. Maybe it's just a B. The life gain mode, yeah, you're almost never going to use it, but given that it's just a mode, it's pure upside. Heliod's Pilgrim, it's a 3 mana 1/2 that lets you search for an aura and put it in your hand. Yeah, we haven't seen that much in terms of auras, right? There was the one. So you need to, there's 2, right? You want to have probably at least 2 targets that you're happy to get in your deck before you play the Pilgrim. But if you do, you're probably reasonably happy to play a copy. Basically, I think you want to have like at least 1 more copy of an aura than you have Heliod's Pilgrims. You probably don't want more than a couple Heliod's Pilgrims anyway. But Dreadful Apathy is the thing you really want to get. If you can get that, then you're pretty happy. You could just search out a removal spell and it's, another body on the battlefield. Commanding Presence would be okay. I imagine there's other stuff in other colors, but because you're white, it really helps, because this is the card you most want to find, is Dreadful Apathy. Gonna go with C for Heliod's Pilgrim, but it obviously depends on what else your deck has. Heliod's Punishment. This is another pacifism type effect. It only costs 2 mana, but after 4 turns, it kind of goes away because they can remove all of the task counters. So that's pretty bad. It's like a 4-turn delay, and they're gonna tap the thing every turn. So it's like a 4-turn pacifism, which is probably pretty bad. You need to end the game before that, basically. So I think it's like a D. Maybe you're an aggressive enough deck that just like 4 turns, removing it for 4 turns is good enough. Maybe it's a D plus. Maybe that happens often enough that buying yourself 4 turns is worth the 2 mana, but I'm not huge on it. Obviously, if you can search it out or if you can get it back with whatever stuff reanimates enchantments, then that gets a little better. Yeah. Anyway, Hero of the Pride, 2 mana, 2/2, fine. Whenever you, this is pseudo heroic. Whenever you cast a spell that targets it, your whole team gets +1/+0. That is pretty good. So this should be a staple of aggressive decks. Now you do need ways to target this thing, but you don't need to target it that much, right? If you can just do it once or twice in a game, the mini Anthem is pretty good, and a 2 mana 2/2 is already a fine card. This is probably a C plus, and if you've got the right deck, it might even be better. Hero of the Winds is a 4 mana 1/4 flyer. Not great stats, but it has that same ability. Yeah, that ability is pretty good. I think this is probably also like a C plus. The more of this kind of ability you have, the less valuable it gets to be because you don't need multiple creatures with it. But having a couple is pretty good. You don't need to have multiple at a time, but having a couple to get one, when you're trying to make your big swing. The fact that there is a common and an uncommon that both do this in this color, and I think there's some more, maybe not in this color, but in other places, is, well, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. And it's something you should watch out for and something you should maybe think about building around to go wide. Idyllic Tutor, I think, is pretty unplayable. You need to have really good enchantments before you'd, and enough of them, but mostly really good ones, before you'd play this. Like, compared to Heliod's Pilgrim, this can get non-auras, but it doesn't give you a body. And I think the body is pretty relevant between Devotion, just chumping. I mean, a 1/2 does some stuff, being a part of a double block, maybe. That said, it can't be that much worse than Heliod's Pilgrim, so I think I'm going to give it a C minus. It goes up a lot if you have really good enchantments. Like if you have that Saga, this Elspeth Conquers Death, if you have Heliod, if you have some of the removal spells as well, Banishing Light and Dreadful Apathy. If you have one of those and Heliod or Elspeth Conquers Death, then this gets to be a good card. But it's just pretty tempo negative to have to spend 3 mana, which is probably your whole turn, to go get something, and then like the next turn you can play it. You really want that. That's something you're getting to be pretty worth it. So this is not nearly as tempo negative because it can at least chump. I'm gonna give this, I guess, a C minus. Indomitable Will, +1/+2 to the creature it enchants. It has flash, which is very important. So you can use this like a combat trick. It's not very good as a combat trick, but it can play. You can use it to trigger your heroic, pseudo-heroic stuff, like on these 2 cards. You can use it as a surprise constellation trigger. I think that adds up to this being playable, but it's still not exciting. I think I give it a C minus. It could be a C. Karametra's Blessing. Pretty standard combat trick. We've seen a couple of pseudo-heroic things, which make it obviously quite a bit better. And then giving that if it's an enchantment or enchanted creature, it gets hexproof and indestructible, means it's kind of can be a protection spell. This card I need to remember for my constructed review because it could see play in Boggles, maybe. Or a Boggles kind of deck, but although those cards usually have hexproof anyway. Indestructible could, anyway. For limited, this card is probably a solid C. If you have more enchantment or enchanted creatures, so more enchantment creatures or auras. It gets a little better, but not that much because you want your +2/+2 to probably save your creature anyway. Does protect it from removal spells that would otherwise be unconditional, though, I guess. Um, I think it more scales with having these pseudo-heroic creatures, but probably a C. Pretty good. Laguna Band Storyteller. When it enters the battlefield, you get a 3/4 for 4, which is fine, like we said before. When it enters the battlefield, you can put target enchantment in your graveyard on top of your library. Okay, I mean, that's not nothing if there's a Banishing Light or something. Or especially, this only exiles the creature, so it would go to your graveyard. You can then rebuy it. Being able to rebuy a good card is a little nice, and you gain a little bit of life. Having said that, you need a good thing to rebuy because it's only replacing your draw step. So it's got to be better than average card before you even do it. I guess if it's an average card, you still gain the life. So if it needs to be an average card. You do get some selection maybe, but it's only 4 mana. So you probably want to play this on curve. And at that point, you probably don't want to put anything on top of your deck that's already in your graveyard, unless you've milled something somehow that's particularly good. So I think this is only okay. It's like a C. Leaning into the last ply, 2 mana, 3/1. We do know that there is some escape. Not so much in white, because there's only been Elspeth so far. But there's some escape, so dying into exiling a card from a graveyard has some value, has some real value. 2 mana, 3/1's also fine. Nothing exciting, though. I think this is about a C. Nyxborn Courser, 3 mana, 2/4 enchantment creature, 2 white pips is... We really haven't seen much devotion to white, so it's probably mostly a downside still. But there's some things that care about that. There's some things that care about enchantments. Looks like another C to me. Omen of the Sun, 3 mana flash to make 2/1/1 humans, and you gain 2 life. That card is not that good in general, but there's enough synergies here that I think it might be okay. You can obviously sack it to scry 2, which is pretty minimal value. But between Constellation, between these couple of go wide things, and between, well, Flash for Constellation, this might get there sometimes. I'm going to give it a C minus. Phalanx Tactics is the real big, I think, go wide payoff, and a reason to play this. But also, like, particularly with these, where are these cards? These 2 cards, if you can go wide at all, you have just 3 or 4 creatures on the battlefield. You target one of them with this, suddenly it has +3/+1. The rest of your creatures have +2/+1, and that's a pretty good anthem for 2 mana. And it's an okay combat trick otherwise. And I think as far as combat tricks go, this is pretty good because it can also be like an anthem. Maybe you can get like a 1-for-1 and then a trade up off of this if they have to block with pretty square stuff. So occasionally you can get a 2-for-1 out of it. Sometimes you can kill your opponent. All in all, it's C plus maybe just a C still. Pretty good combat trick, but nothing like super special. Pious Wayfarer, 1 mana, 1/2. We don't like it. Whenever an enchantment creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can give any, or an enchantment, you can give any creature +1/+1 until end of turn. The fact that it's any creature is nice, but I don't think that you probably have enough ways to do that at instant speed to really let it be a very good combat trick, and the body's just too bad. I think this is like a D minus. Reverent Hoplite, 5 mana, 1/2 that makes a number of 1/1s equal to your devotion to white. So a worst case scenario, this is a 5 mana, 1/2 that probably makes 1/1/1. If they kill this thing before the trigger resolves and you have no other devotion to white, then it might just be a 1/2 that dies and eats an instant speed removal spell. So, but realistic bad case would be a 1/2 and a 1/1, which is pretty bad for 5 mana. I think you want to be getting, if you're getting 3 1/1s out of this, you're reasonably happy. I think you can do that pretty often. If you're getting more than that, you're pretty happy. This card, we've seen some go wide stuff So if we have those synergies, we're pretty happy. Otherwise, we're only okay with it. Like having a bunch of 1/1s is not that great if you don't have a payoff. If you have a lot of 1/1s, it's pretty good, but I think you really want to have the go wide synergies. If you don't, it's pretty bad. If you do, it's reasonable, although it's maybe hard to get a lot of devotion if you have those. I think I'm going to overall give this a C, but it should vary a lot. Revoke existence. In this set, exiling an enchantment or artifact should be pretty good. You're going to main deck this, at least some number of these, like every time. C, maybe a C plus if the enchantments are good enough. Rumbling Sentry, 5 mana 3/6 ETB Scry 1. Perfect. Like 5 mana 3/5 is usually surprisingly good. I mean, usually not good enough to play, but if you have to, it's really not that bad. 3/6 and Scry 1 makes this perfectly playable, but still not exciting. This is C minus, maybe a C, probably C minus. Sentinel's Eyes, enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has vigilance. We're not happy with that, but it escapes for pretty cheap. I think we're still not happy with it, but maybe in the right deck. I don't know. I still give this like a D plus. You gotta rebuy it a lot, but it's just not a big enough payoff, I don't think. Shatter the Sky is a wrath, where every player who controlled a creature with power 4 or greater gets to draw a card. Wraths are good if you have one big creature against, like if you can set up to get where you have a big creature and they have several small ones and they need to commit more because they have several small ones, you have a big one so they got to commit more, you can maybe set this up to be better than a normal wrath, but mostly it's just a wrath, which is like a B plus A minus. Sunmane Pegasus, 4 mana 2/3 flying is okay, and you can spend some mana to give it vigilance and lifelink, which is also okay. This is probably a C. Giving a flyer lifelink is kind of nice. Yeah, Terranika is a 3 mana 3/3, which is good stats. Vigilance, I mean, that's already perfectly fine stats. And then when it attacks, you get to make something else. Untapped 4/4 and indestructible until end of turn, which is pretty good. It also doesn't lose its abilities. So this attacks pretty hard. I think this card's pretty good, but okay, it is only a 3/3, so it can't be great. It's a B, maybe a B plus if you have a good aggressive deck. Transcendent Envoy, 2 mana 1/2 flyer, not getting there for me. Aura spells being cheaper, also not getting there for me. I don't think the auras are that good here. You don't want too many of them, and yeah, you don't want too many, and making them one cheaper is not that big a deal. I think this is like a D minus. This card is real bad. Triumphant Surge. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater, you gain 3 life. I don't know how many 4 or greater creatures there are in this set. So in white, we've seen no creatures that this can destroy. 1, 2, 2. A common and an uncommon. I think this might just be a sideboard card. It's a pretty good sideboard card. Maybe you can main deck one, and you probably main deck one in sealed, but I think overall it's like a D plus, maybe a C minus. Gets a lot worse in multiples, but it's definitely a card that you wouldn't mind having in your sideboard. You'd like to have in your sideboard because you're going to bring it in a lot. Or if you main deck it, you're going to side it out some reasonable percentage of the time. Anyway, that does it for white. We'll catch you again soon with blue.